Hello! I thought I'd make a video about sexual consent, which is unusual of me because I've never actually had sex myself, so I'm not an expert or the such, and I guess my knowledge is in theory rather than practice. But I think I do have some opinions on it and some knowledge, and I guess what I want to say is, I hate to break it to you, but sex is quite unusual in some ways. I mean, it's not a binary thing where it's like black and white and there's set rules to how it's done. Even the definition of sex is something that's debated as to what counts as sex and what doesn't in the first place. Something that comes up almost every time that someone discusses sexual consent is whether or not the person said no. And as I say, sex isn't a black and white sort of world, and no doesn't always mean no, and yes doesn't always mean yes. For example, there used to be these anti-rape campaign adverts on the TV in which the boy in the advert was sort of coercing the girl into having sex with him, saying, "Oh, come on, are you frigid or something?" Or, you know, trying to pressure her into it. And in the end, she sort of gave in and said, "Oh yeah, all right then." And so basically, she had said yes, but she didn't really want to or anything. She's not really consenting. He's pressured her and blackmailed her into it. And on the opposite side of that, no doesn't always mean no. For example, if you're in like a BDSM or a couple of that nature, maybe you as a couple have decided that the word no is allowed to be said, and you've got a safe word instead for stopping it, and so you're allowed to say no and can keep on continuing anyway. And in some respects, that's one of the great things about sex, because you're sort of in this social construct where there isn't the same social construct. You're liberated to be acting however you want to act. If you want to scream, you scream. If you want to moan, if you want to make noises, make noises. If you want to say no, you say no. And if you any of those things, if you want to you get to just be yourself, and hopefully, well, if you've got the right partner, you just get to just be yourself. But in terms of consent, that makes it more difficult to determine what consent is. But I put it to you that consent requires the whole context. To decipher if something's rape, you need to know more than one answer. You can't, in a court of law, they're not just going to go, "Well, did she say no?" Or they're gonna want to know the whole context of it. Or they're not going to go, "What was she wearing?" Or asking for it. No, they're not going to ask just one question. They're going to ask a whole load of questions. They're going to want to know who these people were to each other, whether or not there was any ground rules or precedent in their relationship towards anything, or anything like that, or want to know what was spoken, body language, all of that. They're going to want to know everything. Consent requires the whole context of the situation. It's not just the answer to one thing, and it's not just whether or not the person was aggressive or not, or whether or not the person said no or not, or whether or not what anyone in the situation was wearing or not, or it requires the whole entire context of the situation to be looked at. It's complex, it's complicated. I mean, not even arousal is consent. If someone is aroused, that doesn't mean they're consenting to you. There's the whole context of the thing. It's all complicated and blah blah blah, and there's no set of rules, and it's not black and white, and there's no one question that can determine whether it was or wasn't you just got to have an awareness for the context of what's going on. There was another couple of examples I was going to bring up that I had thought of, which were the film Friends with Benefits. There's one scene where they're in bed and the woman is screaming or moaning or something, and he stops and says, "Are you okay?" And she says, "Yes, continue." And he says, "Well, you were screaming. It was hard to know what you meant." And so, in that context, he didn't know whether or not her screaming meant that she was in pain or pleasure. And another thing I thought of is I saw a TV show once, and in it the man was accused of raping the woman, and he said she never said no, stuff like that. But she had just frozen and gone all still when it was occurring, because she was just in total shock that one of her best friends, who she'd never ever treated in a sexual manner or anything in that way, had suddenly just aggressively pushed her onto the bed and raped her. And in those two examples, one of the people is screaming in the film Friends with Benefits, and the other person in the TV show is completely silent. But the woman screaming is consensual, and the woman silent is being raped. And therein you see that it's not just... It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing.